That's not gonna be with us. No, Chris isn't gonna be with us. Adding a run, we'll officially call the meeting to order. Has the meeting been properly posted and the roll been taken?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, our approval of the minutes. 2.1 are minutes from March 6th, 2023 and minutes of March 21st, 2023, Joint Planning Commission and the Common Council meeting. Entertain a motion to approve those. There's a motion. Is there a second? I'll go ahead and second.
I wasn't present.
Yeah, that's right. You weren't. That's
Yeah.
right. Will and I were the only ones present. Oh, no, you were present.
I was present on.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go ahead and second it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 3 are communications. The only communication I would have is to welcome back Bruce DeWitt, our former alderman here for a long time, and who took over the unexpired term of Steve Cass. So thank you, Bruce, for reaching out, and happy to appoint you. Glad you could be with us this evening and going forward. I don't believe we have any other communications beyond that. And next we'll move on to item number 4, which is the public hearing, review and possible recommendation regarding Corey Awning. 4.1 is a public hearing on a request to consider an amendment to the existing conditional use permit to allow for expansion of a minor outdoor commercial entertainment accessory land use for a restaurant at 627 South 2nd Street, located in the office neighborhood ON zoning district, again, applicant Corey Awning. With that, I would go ahead and open the public hearing. If we want to have staff lead us off.
Do we have a microphone?
We don't have our,
Just talk about.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Corey Awning is in the audience here. We have some questions for him. This came before us in the past at 627 South 2nd Street. He wanted to have a outdoor patio area, and since that time, I believe he's gotten a lot of feedback from people that have been in the restaurant, and he wanted to make this area a little bit bigger. So I wanted him to bring it back to you guys because it would be changing what was approved in the past. So.
did you want to add anything to it?
Just looking to expand it an extra 8 feet to the west, and I guess it would total approximately an additional 25 feet, half of that approximately north, half of that approximately south. I have had some conversation with some of the neighbors. Tom McQueen stopped by, talked to me, gave me his blessing. He was unable to be here tonight because he is in Portland. Val Heth and Art Bain at 731 South 2nd Street are in favor, as well as Anthony. I can't remember Anthony's last name right now, the neighbor just to the south, immediately next door. So, yeah, that's the gist of it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have in regards to it.
Great, thank you, Corey. Any questions from commission members? Kevin?
I have a question directed to T, and that is, do we have a survey map? Because I know that there's a 10-foot setback from the roadway, and I wanted to know where this patio fit compared to that.
Yeah, so our code, well, to answer your question, I don't believe that
We don't have an actual survey of your,
we just have that.
just this.
Yeah.
I just brought this along.
Yeah, so he does have a survey. We would have to double check with that, because from our code, from a safety standpoint, when it comes to patios, we have our code requires a 10-foot setback, at least that's what we've been doing in the past. So we would need to make sure that that setback of that patio is at least 10 feet.
Well, and the reason I ask is, that's a no sidewalk area, right?
Correct, and I believe that, I think in the last few years, because they might widen that road, they actually took 8 feet of that parcel, for the road being widened in the future for future use.
So I think the only image we have is the, I guess it's a Google map image. And I'm just a little bit concerned about where the yellow-black line on that Google map image is versus the patio plan. And I don't know what that yellow-black line indicates, whether it's the property line. That's why I was asking about the survey map.
Yeah, and truthfully, from these, when you go on, this is just off of the GIS, and sometimes, it's definitely not always completely accurate as to where, from a visual standpoint, so.
I understand, but, we're being asked to, permit something that clearly has required setbacks from a right of way. I think that the data provided by and the applicant did nothing wrong. But the data provided by the applicant, shows a sketch that I don't think informs the commission on whether or not, they're encroaching on the right of way.
On that overhead view, you can see where that, black and yellow line is. There's the 3 flagpoles, which would be just inside of that line.
Right.
The patio would extend to just inside of that center flagpole, which is beyond, further back from that black and yellow line there.
So, if that is indeed the case, and that's cool, but we don't know what the yellow and black line means. Sure.
I mean, I think that we, I understand what you're saying, Kevin, and I think that we can, make sure that we get measurements, before he goes ahead and does this, and make sure that he's 10 feet from that line, if that's how we approve it. I know in the approval of it, it says it needs to be that 10 feet, so.
Right, and, so that's cool with me. I would just hope in the future that we would have a survey map, Chairman, that told us exactly where we were.
I understand, I agree with you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak on this issue at this time? Seeing and hearing none, then I would close the public hearing and move on to item number 4.2, which is consider an amendment to the existing conditional use permit to allow for expansion of the minor outdoor commercial entertainment accessory land use for a restaurant at 627 South Second Street located in the office neighborhood ON zoning district, applicant again, Coriani.
So moved.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
A second further discussion? Certainly, Kevin.
I would have one question about, before, and then I want to propose, an amendment to the motion. I have one question, and that is, who you're comfortable with visibility?
Yes, Mark and I both kind of looked at that, and being that 10 feet off, we felt that the visibility would be fine.
And so, how tall is the fire pit gonna be?
That'll be,
That part is like.
I believe it's 30 inches, 36 inches, it's not, yeah, it won't be, and it's 60 by 30 by 36. So,
Okay, thank you. And then, my amendment to my motion would be, Mr. Chairman, if it's accepted, pursuant to, validation that the patio is set back 10 feet from the city right away.
That sounds, I think, certainly based on the discussion that we just had, makes sense in the amendment, or amended motion that you made. Is there
I'll
a second
second.
to the amendment? Okay. Any further discussion?
I just have one question. The staff said that they had some concerns about visibility when exiting the parking lot onto the street. There's no plans to cover this at all, are there?
there may be, some, it's like geometry shapes of shade that would go out, but they wouldn't be attached to the building, and they wouldn't go out all the way to the extent to the end of the patio.
Okay.
That would just be, a few pieces just to provide a little bit of shade with facing west.
Thanks.
And I did, for what it's worth, I did pace it off and went out and, looked at where it was. So my bottom of my feet are a little muddy, but, there's really gonna be no issues with visibility for traffic, people leaving. I would say the bigger issue would be the tree line that comes out, separating the two properties more so than the patio, so.
Thank you. All right, any motion and a second, any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Thanks. We'll move on to item number 5 then, under business. 5.1 is consider a planned infill development amendment to the official zoning map for a step 3 general development plan, GDP, for the former Pick and Save building at 207 South Wright Street, tax parcel XA4527-2, to allow for an expansion of indoor storage, land use, and the development of out parcels in the business regional BR zoning district with a wellhead protection overlay, applicant Brian Fisher for Fisher Consulting LLC. And this was continued from the March 6th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. So, yeah, did you want, I know this was a continuation. I would just say that obviously, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of questions, at the last month's meeting. And I know we've got now, Jackie, you just walked in, but, a new commission member. I say new, but very experienced from his days as a former alderman, involved with city stuff. And then, I know Kevin wasn't able to join us last time. So maybe if you want to just kind of recap a little bit, and then I said plenty, last month. So I'd really open it up to hear more from Kevin at least, and Bruce, after that. And then some of us may have additional questions or comments after that.
Great. Can you all hear me if I just project? Does that work?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
So I apologize for being a little late this evening, but I'm ready to provide a quick overview of what is being proposed this evening. This is an amendment to an approved general development plan for the Smart Cube Shopping Center. There are 5 changes being proposed to the GDP that are outlined clearly in the staff report. What I've done is kind of broken those apart into different, items. So if the commission would like to take action on each one separately to kind of separate the different, issues, I think that would help kind of lead us to a decision or land the plane, as was stated at the last meeting. So the 5 proposed changes include, number 1, relocating the Dollar Tree tenant from its current location in the multi-tenant building to another location, that's the former Slumberland space. Second proposed change is to expand the indoor self-storage land use for CubeSmart. That would be expanding that further south, behind 2 retail spaces in the building. Previously, the city had approved an addition to the east side building or the rear of the property. The applicant is no longer pursuing that and wishes to have that removed from the GDP. Similarly, the applicant had previously had a freestanding retail building approved on Wright Street. They're now preferring to define 2 different outlots with out parcels instead. And so just to provide clarity, what we'd like to do is have that building removed from the approval and the outlots defined to replace that previously approved building. And then the 5th item would be to add a landscape buffer around the existing outdoor trailer display area. Get it back here. So for those of us who may not have been part of the past approvals, this GDP was approved and PIP were both approved in January of 2020. And so that allowed for the planned infill development to be established. And that also granted flexibility for the self-storage use to be included as part of this development. Generally speaking, this development is operating under all of the business regional zoning district rules. But one point of flexibility that was granted in 2020 was to allow for indoor storage use, which is not ordinarily allowed in that zoning district. And so the planned infill development allows for some flexibility, and that was granted through that process at that time. You can see in the staff report, I won't go through them all, but others areas were approved, other things were approved as part of that GDP and PIP to kind of allow for the reuse of the shopping center. Additionally, some small flexibilities for signage were granted at that time, and the applicant and staff agreed that we want to carry those flexibilities forward into this approval. I feel like this commission has a pretty strong understanding of the PID process at this time, but if anybody would like an overview, I'd be happy to provide one or answer questions about that. So in addition to the flexibilities that I just described, we've also included a number of different conditions of approval that are detailed on the last page of the staff report. Would it be helpful if I walked us through the conditions of approval as part of this meeting? Okay, great. I'm just gonna go through them. If anyone wants to pause me at any moment, please feel free to do so. The first one is kind of a standard condition. Number 1, the GDP for this proposed project shall be granted solely as approved by the Common Council. So after the Plan Commission makes its recommendation, Council has a chance to review it as well, and then whatever is agreed to at that time is what is approved. Number 2, this project actually comes with previously approved conditional use permits that predate the general development plan. Those were for Walgreens, Tractor Supply, and O'Reilly Auto Parts. So those conditions of approval and all things that were approved as part of those previous approvals are all carried forward into the 2020 approval and to this approval. So just kind of documenting that. Item 3, we're stating that the requested flexibilities described earlier in the staff report would be included as part of this proposal. So that would include those modest flexibilities for signage, the permission for the indoor self-storage use, and then in this case, expansion of that self-storage use. Condition number 4, just clarifying that while we are approving these future outlots in concept through this GDP amendment, we're not approving any development through this approval at this time. So when the applicant's ready and, has tenants, or buyers for those lots, they'll come through the city for approval. If there's a drive-through, different configurations, we need to review that. So at this time, no development is being approved, we're just identifying where those outlots would be. Number 5, before any development can occur, they do need an approved precise implementation plan or a PIP. So that's, if the out parcels get developed or anywhere else on the site, they do need to come into kind of a site plan review process as well, before they can do anything, which is typical for which is a requirement for all of our PIPs. Number 6 is just stating that if the applicant wishes to make any changes to what has been approved, they probably will need to come through an amended PIP or amended GDP process, depending on what the nature of those changes are. Number 7, and the next few here are related to a few items that were still not completed as of this date, and so the applicant has agreed to take care of these uncompleted items. So number 7 is the property owner shall agree to take over the maintenance of an existing wooden fence located on the city park property. Number 8 is a standard one we include in all of our PIDs, and that the city has to retain the right to inspect the property to ensure compliance with our various codes. Number 9, the property owner shall add a loading dock for the new Dollar Tree location as approved by the fire department. Number 10, the property owner shall correct the parking lot striping near the Tractor Supply front entrance, just an issue of the angled stripes being directed the wrong direction. Number 11, the property owner shall add a dumpster enclosure to be approved by city staff. And then number 12 is just a clarification that we're approving the out parcels and concept as part of the GDP amendment, but the act of approving those through this process does not actually create those outlots. They have to go through a CSM process to do that. And through that process, we're requesting that the applicant prepare cross-access easements and a shared maintenance agreement for those parcels because they are part of the greater shopping center. So in the event that they get sold off, we want to ensure that things like paving maintenance, snow plowing, lighting maintenance, and all that is still covered regardless of who owns what parcel. Number 13 is basically saying that once we've determined the conditions that we're approving and any changes or modifications that they may be made by the Plan Commission this evening or by the council at a subsequent meeting, that becomes what's approved. So the applicant has to prepare modified materials that reflect what has been approved by the city, and that becomes the actual approval document. And then 14 is our standard, any other conditions that may be identified or modified by the Plan Commission or the Common Council.
Any questions on those conditions?
And anything else that you want to share, or Kevin's got a question?
I have, a few staff questions.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Sure.
Yeah. So on item number 5, which was, additional, landscape buffer, can you define on a map or tell us what that meant?
Oh. Let me get oriented.
So here was the original proposed
Yeah.
map. And I'm sorry that I'm having to prepare
I'm just looking through.
stuff
our
for
packet
you.
here.
What was the additional, either
So-
from the applicant or,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can show you really quick.
There.
I'm gonna scoot behind you here. Tractor Supply will park trailers and such in this particular island area right here seasonally. There are a couple of trees, small ones. We're being asked to enhance the
Okay.
landscaping there.
thank you. My next staff question is, in the findings, you guys say, that, this development adds modestly to the tax base.
That's in regards to the changes that they're proposing. It's not in reference to the development as a whole. So just the idea of adding more tenants that are leasing the space would be considered a modest increase in tax base over current conditions.
Okay? So the next question I have is for both city staff and the planners. What is your perspective on the existing retail space and development space supply in the city of Delavan? Are we
Yeah.
oversupplied, undersupplied?
For retail?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't done a full market study on that.
I know, but one of the critical issues in front of the commission is whether we're converting what we may or may not believe is retail space to non-retail space.
And all of our retail space would be in the business regional, zoning district, which would be the purple on that map, so that would be kind of out by the Walmart, the Lowe's, PetSmart area. And then over by the Piggly Wiggly and the Slumberland.
So it would seem to me, and we can talk about whether this is necessary for tonight's debate, but it would seem to me in future discussions, it would be helpful to have a point of view about whether or not our existing developed retail space or the supply of retail developable space is adequate for the community. Because we're talking about the conversion of retail space to a non-retail use.
Correct. I mean, I think that, I agree that that data would be helpful. The amount of retail space being lost in this proposal is pretty modest. And then, you know, through the outlot development, they're likely adding more retail in the future. And so the net loss of retail square footage is pretty modest, in my opinion.
Okay? My next question is, compared to the original already approved plan, so this was the plan with the pink and I guess aqua, I'll call it, storage square footage approved. What's the difference between that and now the new storage approved, which is just the orange space on my chart?
So how much storage square footage is being added? Is that the question?
No, I'm asking whether there's even a difference.
I would say it's pretty insignificant, it's pretty close to, because before they were gonna put an addition like on the back that was gonna have more, storage, but now they're not doing that, and they're talking about, they're basically just swapping out areas of where they were gonna.
There was 19,998 square foot of storage previously. How much square footage of storage is proposed new?
I believe it's just under 18,000 square feet.
Okay, so it's a swap.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I understand Kevin's questions, but it's not necessarily the square footage of storage that we're adding or losing. What we're really losing is retail space on the front. Now, I said you're gonna add 2 more parcels that could increase the retail, but you haven't committed your last commitment to put retail space out on Wright Street. And now you're asking us to take more retail space away and promise us more retail in that area when you haven't even fulfilled the last promise you gave us.
Yeah, I can address that when the time is appropriate.
And so at this point, I have no problems if expanding into the dollar store at all. But going any further than that, I have some concerns about taking retail space away from one of the busiest intersections in Moore County and making it storage. And I'm talking to the same people that came to us back in 2020 and wanted to go into the Shopko building. So your concern is not necessarily retail space. You just want cheap space to put storage in, which brings no benefit to the city as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you pay taxes on the building, but there's not a lot of employment. And there's not a lot of foot traffic. It's a destination place. It's not a place you go to shop.
And Bruce, I would say that the issue of expanded storage is the straw man here. The real issue is how do we redevelop this center? And I look forward to the applicant speaking because like the outlot plan has changed dramatically. And I don't think it's changed
And I agree
favorably.
it has, but I think it is
So,
lot 2, the one that sits behind, the auto parts store. I mean, that becoming a retail space is the hard pressed, in my opinion. Who would go behind an existing retail space and in front of storage? On Rice Street, which is not a heavily traveled, on Hobbs Drive, which is not a heavily traveled street.
so we're getting ahead to the debate here.
And I just would say, I mean, as far as, we're talking about, you know, the square footage of storage, that, you know, whether we're swapping or whatever, the difference really is that you're not, as piggyback off of what Bruce said, you're not building an additional footprint that can fairly be potentially assessed or used. And that is the difference. If we're really talking about, you're not adding something new in that space. And one thing I would say too, because at some point it should be a part of the record, you might recall that I had a question for staff last month, and I know many of you saw the video and got caught up to speed on, again, a very good discussion is, I had asked, what would our assessor overall think of, you know, a building, a retail spot that's used for retail and versus a retail spot used for storage, and we got that answer. I think you thought that it might actually be valued higher with storage, which I found that hard to believe, and actually we got correspondence back from our assessor that verified what I thought, which is the assessment, and we're gonna fairly assess this building, whether it's storage or whether it's retail or what have you, that's not debatable, but our assessor did say that if we had a building of storage versus a building of retail, that would be assessed.
We're talking about your building,
What's that?
talking about new building?
No, I'm talking about just the existing building as is. If we
Yeah, I
kept it
wasn't
as.
privy, I
We
wasn't
should ask
privy
the
to that.
applicant to
I wasn't
speak
privy.
before we debate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just,
I wasn't privy to that email, so I can't.
right, and it would have been, I think, good too for the rest of the commissioners, because I asked if that was maybe included in, but we can certainly get that to you and others on the commission, because it was something that I think that is helpful to consider, but anyways. Did anyone, before we go to the applicant here, did anyone else have any questions for our staff? At this time? Okay, if not,
Okay.
you're welcome
Thank you.
to, yeah.
So I'm Brian Fisher from Fisher Consult. I had sent out a narrative, which should have been in your packet, and hopefully you all read through it. This is pretty important. I had a couple of figures in there as well. And I'm sorry, but this is a really handy little map here. So this proposal, if it's approved, will have this center 100% occupied. And there is a tenant waiting to sign an agreement. Once we get approval here, the owners of the Mustard Street management wants to move forward with a revised CSM to create the 2 outlots that we talked about, which would be behind O'Reilly and right here. And we would have a center that would be 100% occupied, which hasn't happened in over 12 years. That I can tell you is gonna happen. That's without even developing the outlets. We're gonna take the storage, which was already approved to move into the Dollar Tree. We're gonna take the Dollar Tree and put it where Slumberland, which vacated where the shop went. We're gonna put an ice cream shop storefront. That's the plan, and then hopefully that'll still work. This little connector piece here, we want to expand the storage into that area. And there's already the storage office, and I got Dale Schultz here he's the manager from CubeSmart, and he promised I would bring him along. Included some data on who is renting, where are they coming from, what's the occupancy rate, so any questions you may have relative to the actual functioning and how the center's working at this, the storage facility, we got Dale here for that. We're gonna take this small spot here, which is a lot less than the addition we were gonna put back here. We're not gonna disrupt, the back of this building. And we will have a facility that's 100% occupied. And that's gonna happen as soon as I can get the PIP done. I'm going to then, if we get approval, and we hope we do, we will immediately begin the CSM and create cross-access easements. And there will be a lease hopefully signed for 11,000 square foot building that will probably be 2 tenants. And talking to my client, I don't know if he's gonna put that in this outlot or this outlot. But if you look at my figure 2, you'll see that by developing these 2 outlots, we are essentially developing everything that's in front of this part of the center. This is the part of the center that we're talking about, is this storefront, which I think is the part that's got everybody, that's created some heartburn. I will also say that since 2020, and you're right, the idea was to move Dollar Tree to this outlet up front. Then COVID hit, and they weren't gonna move and go anywhere, they wouldn't even answer phone calls. So the idea of moving them there just went away. It wasn't because of Mustard Street Management's, lack of trying. It's a lot easier for them at their expense to move them into this Slumberland. It makes a lot of sense to move them here because this is a mid-sized to large box, and they're very difficult to fill. They just are. Since COVID, that's just the reality. So now we have an ability to fill that storefront, and that little bit in the back, we're gonna infill it with self-storage. Nobody will ever see it. I can also, and I put in the narrative that Mustard Tree Management is willing to sign any type of agreement that if they're approved today, that this is the end of their expansion of storage in the center. So to summarize, there's already the CubeSmart office right here. We're gonna ring it with storage. We're gonna infill behind the Dollar Tree and the ice cream shop with some storage. It's about 10,000 square feet. You can't see it, but the very back 30 feet is actually access to loading dock for Tractor Supply. So it's not a very big area, but what it does is it makes the center 100% occupied. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. Outside of that, I know Scott right now, he couldn't be here because he's at ICSC in Las Vegas trying to find another retailer to take that second lot. He is motivated to do it if he gets approval. I can't speak how motivated he's gonna be if he doesn't. They've got centers all over the country. Scott's got a soft spot in his heart for Delavan. I love it, and I think this is a great center. He thinks it's a great center. So I guess I'll just be quiet for now and be happy to answer any questions. And I have Dale here if you have any questions relative to self-storage, the type of people that are renting, how long they're staying, where they're coming from, the whole 9 yards. So, thank you.
Any quick, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd like to start with, what is the thinking? The thinking or strategy concerning, the change in the original agreement from the original retail outlet to CSM
We could put a similar box just as we were showing for the Dollar Tree. We chopped up that area to create two parcels.
So you'd be comfortable with an approval that says you guys can, have a retail outlet with no CSM?
No, we have to come back with this, once we know we can move forward with
No,
the.
that wasn't my question.
Okay.
What was the strategy in the change between no outlots, no CSM to two CSM?
I think it was to be able to market it to potential retailers to show that here is a particular lot that's been approved through a CSM process that we can now develop.
Why are they oriented as outlined? For CSMs. So previously, the development said we were gonna become a unified development. That was the historic development, with additional retail on the outline, to now, no changes in the openings off of Wright Street and a CSM there and a CSM across on Hobbs Drive. Why were they oriented that way? What was the development objective?
The development objective is to be able to get more than one retailer into the center.
So, based on Scott's comments at the last meeting, where he said that he feels he's disadvantaged at this site because there's better retail around the corner, why would he choose to put the second CSM around the corner as opposed to on Wright Street?
I think it's a bonus lot, the Wright Street lot is a much easier sell
Why?
because it's on Wright Street.
Well, but why would you then have the Hobbs Street lot? Why wouldn't you have two Wright Street lots?
That's a
I
question.
guess it's just to utilize the empty space that's not being used. The one on Hobbs Drive would just be a pocket, but the one on Wright
So, to me,
Street.
the Hobbs Street, the Hobbs Street second outlot seems like a straw man to me. It seems like we're proposing a second development that could entice to the city approval rights because we think it might have commercial ability. As opposed to being realistic about what actually be developed in this parcel. And I go back to 2020, and at that point, the original proposal for the storage was drive-in storage, access, the parking right in front of the storage facility was critical so that people could come in and unload and now, this parcel along Hobbs Drive, seems incongruous with what you guys said back then.
Well, there's a plan that shows the proposed building on the Hobbs side that has parking that still remains in front of the storage center with connection through the storage center. And since the
Well,
facility is.
where is it? Built on top of the O'Reilly's?
No, I don't, if you don't have, we submitted a plan of.
No, this is actually from your memo this week.
Right, but when we submitted last month, I can't see from the map.
This is the memo you sent us this week.
Correct, but there was also in the packet from the previous,
That's not what you're asking approval for.
well, it is.
So then my third question is, how viable do you think lot 2 is?
That's the tenant that he wants to, that he's about to sign an agreement wants to go in the yellow spot against us.
So he would be comfortable with with everything being contingent upon the signature for lot 2. He's that confident,
Yeah, he absolutely is.
okay? And can you guys propose a plan that shows us what that?
Yeah, last
development would look like?
month's middle, it was included. We
It
had-
was not. Well, show me a site plan with a building on lot 2.
I'll see if I can pull it up.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't recall that either. The discussion was about two, as Kevin pointed out, 2 lots that fronted out along Wright Street or close.
no, they always propose this, but my point is, I've never seen a proposal that shows a building planned on lot 2.
Give me a minute, I can.
I'm
should
happy to
pull
do
it
it.
up.
Just
And my last question is, would you guys be comfortable making additional self-storage contingent on the Dollar Tree relocation?
That might be a difficult,
I would add to that, it would also include the development of lot number 2 in the retail. Because I've heard this promise before about outright turning the retail, and it has not happened.
And
And I'm not gonna say you should have more storage and slowly pick away at the retail in that shopping center.
so, and our skepticism is justified. October 4th, 2021, Syracuse.com, which happens to be the Rochester newspaper, the owner of Mustard Street he said mall owners are somewhat reluctant to first sell to their vacant big box stores to him because they still have hopes for retail revivals, but eventually see the light. Eventually, I think everybody comes around to the fact that vacant buildings are an eyesore, he said. Though self-storage doesn't generate the traffic in terms of employment or customers, it's a viable business. The building will never suffer vacancy, burned out light bulbs, broken curb stones, or smashed glass. That will never be the case with the Bonton space, which was like 10,000 square feet. He converted in Rochester, and it had all those years ago. So, I mean, I think we have evidence that the intention of the applicant is to convert space to storage. I think I'm comfortable with trading their intention for proven retail development. I don't think we have evidence that the retail development is proven.
yeah, I had submitted the plans with the proposed outline. I'm not sure why it didn't get to everybody's packet, so
Would
I
staff
apologize for that.
have something on hand that,
they had at one time submitted something that had a building on it, but without a land use, like whether it needed a drive-through or what type of use they were proposing, that information wasn't available. And we didn't feel comfortable approving that because we wouldn't know what the parking counts would be, and there were a lot of other site planning considerations. So we asked them to actually remove the theoretical building to simplify the approval process, and maybe that backfired.
Yeah, we did submit it, so, and Freedom Fireworks is the tenant, and they're ready to sign a lease for 10 years. And, the sooner we can get this approved, the sooner we can do it. I'm not sure how best to write that into an approval, but.
You said it was Freedom Fire, you said,
Fireworks.
fireworks?
for outlot 2?
Correct. and a co-tenant that I cannot name yet. So there'll be 2 tenants that are ready to sign in that exact spot, which is the harder of the 2 to develop. And Scott is at ICSC in Las Vegas right now, trying to find a more national tenant for outlot 1, for the main one that's on Wright Street.
Kevin? Well, in our last meeting, and I wasn't here, and I apologize for that. Scott said the reason he couldn't be here tonight was because he was, out of the country. And he said that ICSC was in May.
That's what I.
Then I'm getting it mixed up. That's what I thought he was. That's my fault.
Any other questions? For the applicant?
And Dale, thank you for being here, cause I did ask some, cause one of the things that Scott, in trying to make his case for storage, he had said something about businesses that maybe currently that none of us would be aware of necessarily elsewhere in the city limits. So I don't know if you've got any documentations or anything that you wanna share for the record on what, to further your, I guess, case that you're trying to make as to, how storage is.
Well, just for the residential versus business/organizational use. Obviously, there is an exact need for the residential aspect for people moving in on the border and zip lines and towns around here in Delavan. There's nothing in regard to in the sense of storage. All the competitors within the area, almost throughout all of Walworth County, do not offer what we are offering. So therefore, we put ourselves on a higher pedestal and it's showing. We have customers who are coming in here, moving in 1 apartment of bedrooms to 5,000, 8,000 square foot houses. And we also have businesses who are utilizing, for example, I have a customer that's stored over 10,000 square feet, or just about 10,000 square feet of hardwood flooring. No other facility could accommodate that. I was a lifesaver for that guy. The Walworth County Arts Council, they stored antiques and paintings in my facility for an elongated amount of time. Period. They were satisfied. There was no issues with their stay, no issues with their belongings. That's just minuscule descriptions I can give you. We have been exponentially growing. We have been consistently staying above our 90% occupancy. We only have 230 units, but we can honestly see filling up and keeping a 90% occupancy with 400 units. There is an exact need for all the storage that we have right now. And the competitors can't keep up. And if the competitors are trying to keep up, they're trying to incorporate climate control storage units into their own facilities. And they just can't keep up with the load that we have. In the sense of expanding, yeah, I get the idea that storage could be an eyesore in the sense of retail. But reality of it is, you're not gonna have nobody shopping at these places if you don't have people moving into the area or anything. All I can honestly say is, there is a need, there is an overwhelming response from all the customers. I have personal relationships with almost every single customer I've rented to. We've rented to over 500 people since we opened in June of 2020. I have had no negative instances. I can honestly say that it's a very good part in this area specifically, Lake Geneva, Delavan, Elkhorn. People need climate controlled storage units, because I myself wouldn't want to put my stuff that I worked hard for that are nice in a shack, in a shed. Would you put your nice king mattress or your nice leather sofa in a non-climate controlled storage unit? No, you wouldn't do that. So we obviously have clientele that specifically need us and need us for, once again, a elongated period of time. I have a customer that's renting 5 units right now, 4 10 by 30s, 1 10 by 20. He's been renting for almost a year now, waiting for his house to be built. So there's a need when we need it, when customers need it.
And I would ask you, because it sounds like you work at the let the office and the
Yes, sir.
front. Have any realtors approached or stopped in or emailed or called about retail in general as opposed
Just
to
at
storage?
the suite next to Dollar Tree, the vacant suite. There's been multiple people trying to go in there. But in the sense of, once they look at the space, they realize, oh, with the traffic that's Wright Street gets, it is the most prominent intersection in all of Delavan, but I can honestly say that for a retailer to go into those spaces right there, they're hidden. They're not gonna get the response from the community that you think that they would get. So I can honestly say that for the time being, until Delavan does grow in population, you're just gonna be waiting on people to fill in those empty suites, and they're collecting dust the whole entire time, and that's why we could honestly say, hey, we'll fill in this empty suite for the time being, maybe attract more people to the plaza. This gives Dollar Tree a chance to freshen up. I don't know, I just see nothing but good coming from it, and then here's the thing about storage, is it's not always forever. We're not gonna honestly be here probably for the next 20 years, I would hope so, but there is potential growth for retail use in the future, but for right now, I don't see it. And that specific plaza, that's why everyone's going across the highway to, the Walmart Plaza, and the Farm and Fleet Plaza. I mean, that's where everyone's gonna start going, in my opinion. It's drowning out Dunham's. Dunham's is borderline running out of business themselves because they can't sell. Tractor Supply is the only thing that's keeping them alive, and then Dollar Tree just has a very, very, loyal customer base. I see this, I'm there 6 days a week, I see the same customers every single day. I see the traffic that's coming through there. If it's not Dollar Tree, not Tractor Supply, it's nothing else.
Any, Bruce, did you have a question?
You made a comment before when Kevin asked you a question about, approving your plan contingent on Dollar Tree moving into Sutherland, and you never answered that question.
Well, I'm not the owner, I can't answer that question.
So you could push Dollar Tree out and not go Sutherland at all.
No, that would, what I can tell you is that Mustard Street Management wants desperately to move Dollar Tree into that location, is willing to spend a fairly sizable amount of money to do so. I mean, I think making it contingent isn't gonna necessarily light the fire under Dollar Tree, but it's gonna be Mustard Street lighting the fire under Dollar Tree to move it, and they really want to.
Any other questions, comments of staff or the petition? Alright. What would be the commission's pleasure?
But I think you have to close the hearing.
No, it's already closed.
Okay.
So it's already closed.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of.
Yeah. No, I had to refresh my memory too. I'm like, I think we closed the hearing last time, but I was like, maybe we didn't. So I read the minutes and it said we closed the public hearing and stuff, so.
So if that's the case, I have a couple.
Yes.
So, would the chair allow discussion of the suggested motions?
Absolutely, I think that, yeah, certainly.
So on motion one, which was to, and I'm not making the motion.
Sure.
I think staff should talk to the applicant to say that, any expansion of self-storage land use further south and behind the two retail spaces would be contingent upon Dollar Tree, executing a relocation lease. On motion two, my perspective is that, I'm not satisfied at all with the arrangement of the two future out parcels, I think, I would direct staff that the future out parcels would be, commercially viable, or that there would be evidence of commercial viability. So, perspective that they had a proposed lease on what we're defining as outlot 2 before we would agree to that, because outlot 2 seems unviable. On suggested motion 3, I don't know why that's even in front of us. If it says that we're supposed to approve the relocation of a retail tenant from location to another location, that shouldn't be in front of us. If the businesses want to consummate that agreement, we have no voice.
I assume that's because in the prior agreement, they agreed to move them to the outlot. That was my only reasoning behind that motion.
So,
Should allow them to move to the other building.
so, I just think, we should get clarity. And I don't have any comments on motions 4 or 5, but on those 3 motions, I think there should be an agreement between the applicant and staff, instead of us making up terms of an agreement between a developer and the city of Delavan.
Well, could I address item 1 really quick?
Motion one, sure.
Motion 1. The expansion of storage is not going to happen unless Dollar Tree moves. So I guess, I don't want to, I think I would be comfortable in saying that we would accept an amendment to the motion that says that the expansion cannot happen unless the Dollar Tree moves
Moves to where?
to the location that we're showing on the plan that was submitted.
The old Slumberland building?
Correct. Because they wouldn't spend the money to expand storage unless that space were made available where the Dollar Tree is now.
And with that suggested motion 1, that also include the provision in your note that said that this would be the last request for final, this would be the last, final chapter of expansion of some
Correct,
sort.
and that I've gotten the okay from the.
So a motion, so the applicant would be comfortable with contingent on the relocation of Dollar Tree and a limit on all future storage in this, I can't remember, GDP, whatever, for storage.
And I can even address motion 2 quickly on the outlots. The whole idea, I believe, that Scott had in making those outlots was to show that he wants to increase the retail presence in terms of 2 outbuildings. And we've had this back and forth with staff. Once we can officially identify what's going to go on lot 2, it may well reshape what we have here. We're just asking permission in the GDP process, and maybe it's not even important, that the city would support, outlot development in those locations, generally speaking. And, the final CSM will happen and be created once we know what we're going to, the exact footprint of what this upcoming parcel development will be on lot 2.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, I'd like to go further, because I think I want to keep doing retail improvement other than just the movement of Dollar Tree, because actually Sutherland moved across the street, and I don't know the reason why, but they moved across the street. So that retail space is empty. And then we move Dollar Tree into there, and we give storage to them for that. We basically emptied one retail store and given storage away. So I need commitments on one of those outlots for retail space before I would move forward for additional storage.
And I would say this. if I
But
can
otherwise,
speak.
it's just gonna be around, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, that,
Oh,
and
just
I'm
around.
sorry, but we're handicapped because, we haven't been provided with, typical developer, graphics. So, I made these today. This is the original plan. Okay, and this is the new plan. And the new plan characterized, by you guys, is that instead of what the city bought, which was one entrance, a traditional owned by developer retail location out here, we are now gonna deal with two future to be zoned, future to be developed locations around the corner that continue to provide multiple curb cuts here, without congruity to the rest of the development. And the value we are buying is that the stuff that's in front blocks the ugly stuff in back,
Yeah, that's harsh.
right? And so, I mean, that's the worst way I could say it. And, but to Bruce's point, I think we need to have some assurances. Because everybody who voted for this, and I was on the plan commission and voted for this, and Bruce was on the council and reluctantly voted no or yes, I don't know, but there are a number of us who own part of this. This was a solution. Right, and so all we're saying is the solution 3 years later didn't turn out to be the solution, and we're not gonna get into why or any of that. But contingency is important to us now.
Yeah, and I would just, and speak again on behalf of the owner, they're not giving up on the center, so
I know they are.
And just to provide some context, I didn't bring it up at last month's meeting, but I've met with Scott at other staff development meetings, and Bruce said maybe he didn't know the reason why necessarily the Slumberland moved, but I heard from a very reliable source that the only reason why they moved out of this complex is that someone from management came in to, in their words, jack up the lease agreements, and the amounts for it, so they were able to go to in what some would argue, a better location for bigger amount of foot space and square footage for a less price. So to Kevin's point, and yes, I was around too as an alderman at the original one, I want assurances too, because and I do appreciate, that's something new that you said, because I asked that at the last meeting too, if what's to say that you're not gonna just continue to expand, and there was no acknowledgement or willingness to write into it that you won't go any further stuff, so I do appreciate that.
right, and I can, and the reason why, when I talked to Scott, and Dale may not be a big fan of me saying this, but there really is a limit to, you know, how much climate controlled storage you can have in a location. Where, you know, where it becomes, it just doesn't work. So you want to be at a certain occupancy rate. They're enjoying that occupancy rate now. And they have a capacity to make that expansion, which is roughly the size of what we originally had asked for.
And I will just say one other thing too, is that I've been around long enough, and others have been around long enough to know that we had agreements in places that said they're not gonna do this or that, or ask for this or that, and councils have changed, and directions have changed, what have you. So we may be talking today that you're acknowledging no more expansion to the south, we're gonna have this agreement and, there's nothing that says those other two lots won't be buildings for storage in the future if the retail doesn't.
Well, I
work out.
mean, I guess my answer to that is this is a GDP. And you're going to approve, the items we're asking for, which is now expanding storage, which was not approved originally. And, we can memorialize however you wish that we're not gonna expand that. But if somebody comes to an outlot and says, hey, we wanna throw storage, first of all, you wouldn't put a 10,000 square foot building down with storage. That's just never gonna happen. It'd have to be 8 stories tall. And you're not gonna approve that either. So, we come to the plan commission and if somebody's crazy enough to suggest putting storage in an outlot, I know exactly where that's going. It's going to be denied. So I think what they're proposing is somewhat logical, that you have a small difficult space that has a storage office in the middle of it that we want to infill. There's every goal to move the Dollar Tree into the Slumberland space, because it's gonna be a tough space to fill otherwise. So it's a motivation for Mustard Tree to move in there. They've got a tenant that wants to move into the rest of that space, and now you've got a center that's 100% full. And I think that's a win-win.
Kevin, did you?
I'm just trying to figure out a way to move forward.
And, land the
So-
plane, right?
Huh?
Land the plane, right?
Oh, no.
No, we talked about this.
So basically, this was what was originally proposed. We wouldn't do red, we want to do orange. Okay, I think orange is the new storage, red's the old not storage. I think there's no question you have the right to do storage in the existing Dollar Tree store at the point it vacates or at least it expires, right? So the city has no right to avoid that being a storage facility. We have to be clear about that. You want us to provide you with some flexibility about additional storage with the elimination of that storage facility behind it. I think it is responsible on the part of the city to suggest that you guys prove that you've got an agreement with Dollar Tree to relocate before we give you that right. And as it pertains to the outlots, which I think you guys think are the sweetener, I think that's the development problem. Because I think they have to be better defined. I think we have to understand their use and how they look, right? I mean, at the last meeting, Scott was saying, we're gonna move a firecracker facility and a laundromat out front. Okay, and they're viable. And I'm happy to hear they're viable, but it's like, is that the best retail use for that property becomes a question, I think, for the plan commission. And so, I don't know what we can do tonight without you being prepared to make, even motion one contingent on Dollar Tree accepting, contingent on proof of Dollar Tree relocation. But I think frankly, we have more work to do on the two outlots. I don't know, that's just my sense, and I think it would be beneficial to the applicant if the chair would poll the remainder of the members to get some direction.
Yeah, I'm happy to
Yeah, gather some more thoughts and hear some more feedback.
I guess my frustration comes with looking at, I haven't been here before. I haven't been part of this until a month ago. I certainly, as a person who lives on that side of town, have a difficult time with empty buildings. Makes me crazy, and empty parking lots and all of that. So I have a problem with that. On the other hand, I'm very quick to agree with everything that's been said tonight, that it doesn't feel like we have enough information to be comfortable stepping into the next level of agreement. That's my thought process. I guess I'm a little bit questioning what the intent really is here and what the real plans are.
Will, you?
First off, Brian, thank you for the additional information. I'm not sure that I have it all here, but I think I've seen it. I was hoping to see a different utilization for the frontage of the existing building. I was hoping to see more small retail offices. In my mind, I thought, this can work out well for everybody. The smaller retail stores and on the frontage, folks aren't looking for 10,000 square foot buildings. They're looking for 1,000 or 2 feet to put in their little retail operation. And then you've got this massive building behind there that's really not usable for much more than storage. Unfortunately, that's not what I'm seeing here. The second point has been well covered here tonight with regard to the outlots 2 and 3. It's difficult to see there is no proposal, so that it's difficult to see from the city standpoint what we might be entering into on those 2 lots.
Thanks, thank you, Will. Bruce?
First of all, yes, I gave you a lot of opposition the first time you came to us. And I know that old grocery stores are very difficult to rehabilitate, mainly because of the way they're built and their structure. And I must commend you on making that building look pleasing to the eye, at least, and coming through and fixing up the parking lot and behind the buildings. You fulfilled that part of your bargain, or your proposed plan. To go forward with future storage, I would obviously need some commitments on some retail space in order to expand storage. I got the feeling that, and it may just be how I feel, that you want to just take over the shopping center and make it storage, and retail is not part of your plan at all. And I think to make that shopping center, antiquated as it may be, too much storage, it's a misuse of property in that area, given how busy Wright Street really is. The outlot on Wright Street is very vital. It's very vital. I mean, you talked about COVID-19, that did slow things down a little bit, but I would think you'd have a lot of prospects for the outlot on Wright Street. I agree with Kevin on the one on Hobbs Drive. I don't know what kind of retailer would go in there. Certainly not one that depends on traffic. But I would need assurance that Dollar Tree is going to move, and I also might need some insurance on an outlet on Wright Street. I don't want to just, I don't want to say, well, we're gonna put something there, but it never happens. Kind of like what's already happened.
Thanks, everyone, for providing some additional thoughts and,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
An additional question for you, Brian, on lot two. You're telling us that, in fact, you do have a tenant for part of that building?
There are 2 tenants. And yeah, it's Freedom Fireworks and it's a laundromat,
The laundromat, okay. I'm,
which are destination retail.
I seem to recall the laundromat going in the primary structure
It's,
at the last meeting.
that's what I recall too.
Yeah, no, they would be in that. With Freedom Fireworks. Freedom Fireworks was originally gonna go in the inline space, but when Scott offered them to go lot 2 along Hobbs, they jumped at it.
So. Good. I- I think it's very difficult for us to, like on the staff suggested, most of number 3, talking about where Dollar Tree should be from one to another, say who should go where. But I do think we suffer from a lack of good definition of what the real future development of this area looks like. And I listened in depth to the last meeting and understand from my previous professional experience, the contingency of agreements on developments like this. But given we're at the end of the 3rd year of an agreement to complete 3 phases, of which one is mostly complete, I would hope you understand there's some sensitivity to having a better sense of what are the secure agreements related to this. If one were to propose a change in the Dollar Tree location and an expansion to unused retail spaces for self-storage with well-defined building, I'm not saying architectural plans, but building plans and tenant plans for the outlots, I think it would be a lot easier for a commission to move forward.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think it's tough. It's kind of a chicken and an egg.
I heard that, but so we just dealt, for example, with a building on the corner of the Shopco lot that was a chicken and egg. Okay, it was a really bountiful chicken. It was a Perkins that had been successful, that was only closed because of a fire. Okay, and we received a redevelopment proposal that called for its demolition, called for a redevelopment that was unlike anything the city had done before, with multiple drive-throughs and stuff like that. So I think we can demonstrate that we can think through a chicken and egg situation and say, okay, there's a good chance you'll get both these guys without signed lease if we give you that approval. But you guys haven't presented that. Scott said in the last meeting, I'm really close. I can't share this lease with you. He said, in terms of Dollar Tree, I've got my lease term set so that, it doesn't cost them anything out of pocket. But of course, it costs them something with an increased square footage rent space, right? But he hasn't demonstrated, in my mind, evidence that says, I've got a letter of agreement, or stuff like that. And so, I appreciate that it's difficult. I think the amount of time that the commission has spent the last two meetings with the applicant to say, we're trying to figure out how to make this work better, should be good indication that there's flexibility. But, we've gone through, so I just think, there's an opportunity here for the applicant to demonstrate a little bit more certainty. I'm sorry.
Good faith.
I would definitely, and again, I think I've spoken up at the last meeting and other meetings that we've had, at just staff meetings, where I stand, but concur with everything that's been shared. I mean, we've.
I guess then from my perspective, I would ask the plan commission consider to hold this over again. Because I hear what you're saying, and, I need to take this back to Scott. Again, I think in his mind, to submit these two outlots now was to be able to then take them to retailers and say, here, I've got two outlots. Now subsequently, there's been, somebody that's come forward that wants to utilize one of those lots. And so maybe we need a little bit more time to develop that. So when I say chicken and the egg, I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I think this is productive. I'm not gonna say we didn't have a productive conversation, because I think we did. But we need to have assurances. Again, we're not gonna be moving anywhere with storage if Dollar Tree doesn't move or vacates or whatever they are gonna go away. I don't think it'll happen. So I guess, I don't want necessarily to have, unless you wanted to approve it, if denial is the only best way out for you in your mind, I would like to hold it over so we can continue to develop this. Because I think there's an answer here, so we just have to get to it.
Thank you for that. Bruce, were you gonna say something? Or, I don't, okay. Any thoughts on continuing this again for another month? For some more feedback?
Makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Well, especially if you're gonna have someone come in outlot too, obviously that would firm that spot up and would give us some clarity. And you also would, give me some clarity on Dollar Tree is all. That's really what we're looking for is clarity and some. What's really gonna happen there?
Yeah, and I think if I can have a takeaway from this, and I hope you'll understand. I think from Scott's perspective, he wants to know that if everything is presenting itself and we have the commit from Dollar Tree, and we have a lease signed, and we come back with a certified survey map and cross-access easements for creating two outlots, if he knows that there's gonna be support there, if we can, if we can demonstrate this, that's what he's looking for. So nobody's really making a commitment. What I'm hearing today is, what I'm not hearing is, no way ever is it gonna happen, go away. What I'm hearing is, if you present, us with some real, evidence that Dollar Tree is willing to commit to moving, and that you have a lease in place, and here's a certified survey map, which I know staff would probably really enjoy. Here's a certified survey map with the easements and everything else. To Kevin's point, now we have something to really talk about.
Sounds good. Well, I would.
Right.
Go ahead.
I would just say, I don't think we have to go to certified survey maps. right? But, at this point, but I think, commission would say, if you sat within these parameters broadly, we have an agreement on 2, we know 3, and potentially 4 is marketable. It would be very helpful. Because the organization has said, eventually, I think everyone comes around to the fact that vacant buildings are nice, and self-storage is the way to go. We just want a solution that isn't that future.
Good. Anyone care to make a motion to? Or do you need-
Go ahead. I'd like to make, Brian, you might want to ask the petitioner to revisit the location of lot 2. Thank you.
You know, motion to adjourn.
No,
No, not quite yet. I was just looking to see, I don't know that we had any.
we said consider, and never proposed a motion. So I think it's in order to, move to a date certain to reconsider 5.1, and that date certain being May.
Whatever the first.
Andy,
I don't have the calendar in front of me, I was looking for that.
May 1st.
May
It is
1st.
May 1st, okay. All right, so did anyone care to?
I made-
that motion? Okay, there's a motion, is there a second?
Sure, second.
Motion and second, any further discussion? Seeing, and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
All right.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, same sign, motion passes. Thank you, Brian, thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Then we'll move on to item number 6, which is the update on building and zoning related matters.
I didn't see that.
Team, you wanna give us a little update?
Sorry, Keith. No, that's fine. No, my department, is pretty busy. We've got, quite a few homes that have been sold over in Harbor Club, over by Lake Lawn.
quite a few, what's that mean?
I believe that they have, well, I have 13 permit applications on my desk. So,
Outstanding, that tip is actually gonna pay off at some point.
yeah, and I believe they might have sold a couple while I was on spring break, so. And then I also know that the other subdivision that US Shelter's doing, over on Arbor Ridge, I did an inspection with, Jim, and, they said that they had a couple of homes that, were pretty much gonna be under contract in the next week. So things have been moving out there. And then also over, behind the high school there on Tamarack and, Evergreen, I think I have like 3 more single-family homes, in that subdivision, so quite a few single-family homes, going, and then if you drove by the old Perkins, the, Noodles and Company and Qdoba, they started the, building of the construction of the shell, so that's moving on, and then we've got a few, we've got the Toronto homes that, you've probably been watching, so, and they're at, Toronto's also doing some, 2 4 units and a duplex, which I have those plans on my desk also, so we're gonna be pretty busy. You guys have any specific, oh, and I was gonna say, I was out at Lake Lawn this morning, they had, a lot of trees come down. One of the trees, damaged 2 of the hotel rooms. No one was in those rooms when it fell, everybody was fine, but there's, quite a bit of structural damage that, happened there, so, they've got people out there that are gonna be tarping that off, and they'll have to get an engineer out there, and they're gonna get that fixed as soon as they can.
Good, Will?
T, hopefully this question's for you. At one point, the council passed a moratorium on a ratio between multifamily and single family. Do you recall that at all?
I don't think I was here when that
No, you
happened.
weren't. My question is the status of that.
No, we could probably run the numbers.
Yeah, I can run the numbers and get back to you. I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know, I wouldn't know that as well.
Yeah, it might be relevant as the next drawing proposal comes in.
Yeah.
Alright, any other, Kevin?
When you do that, figure out whether or not it really matters based upon whether or not we've passed a new comprehensive plan. And then secondly, where are the duplexes and quads being?
Those are on Autumn Drive, I believe.
Well, if there's no other questions, I think Bruce already made a motion to adjourn.
You don't like to waste time.
So, if Bruce, you're okay with making that motion, then
So
I'm
moved.
gonna entertain a second. Will second. All in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
We're out of here. Wait a minute.